The glass slipped from my hand before I even realized I was holding it too tight. It hit the marble floor with a sickening crack, champagne spraying in every direction like liquid fireworks gone wrong. The room fell into a hush, only for a second, before the laughter came, sharp and cruel, bouncing off the crystal chandeliers above. "Don't just stand there, Sophia. Clean it up." My mother's voice was low but poisonous, the kind of tone that didn't need to be loud to humiliate you. She stood at the edge of the crowd in her emerald dress, her diamonds catching the light, her lips pursed into that thin line I knew too well. Every guest had turned toward me. Men in tailored suits, women with pearls and martinis in hand. Their stares weren't shocked, they were entertained. They'd seen me play this role before, the family embarrassment, the awkward extra, the reminder of everything my mother wished she could erase. My name is Sophia Hayes. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? I crouched down, gathering shards with my bare hands because there wasn't a napkin in sight. My knees pressed into the cold marble, the hem of my black thrifted dress brushing the sticky puddle. My brother, Nathan, leaned casually against the staircase railing, sipping his champagne like a king surveying his kingdom. His smirk was a spotlight, pulling every whisper and every laugh toward me. The party was his, after all. A grand celebration for his promotion at our father's company. 100 guests, a 5-piece jazz band, gold-rimmed glasses filled to the brim, all for him. Nathan wore a custom navy suit that probably cost more than my entire year's rent. I was told to wear something simple and respectable. Translation: cheap, invisible, forgettable. I sliced my finger on a jagged edge of glass, blood welling instantly. It stained the napkin someone finally shoved into my hand, crimson blooming against the white like a crime scene painting itself. A man crouched beside me. Older, gray at the temples, his tuxedo perfectly pressed. He picked up a shard and dropped it into the tray I was holding. His eyes flicked toward mine, and in a voice only I could hear, he whispered, "They shouldn't treat you like this." I froze. Strangers didn't defend me. Strangers didn't even acknowledge me. Before I could respond, my mother's voice sliced across the silence again. "Sophia, hurry up. You're embarrassing us." The crowd chuckled on cue, like trained seals. My father, as always, stood rooted near the bar, saying nothing, seeing everything, doing nothing. That was his specialty, silence as complicity. Nathan lifted his glass high. "To family," he said, his grin wide and cruel. The room erupted in cheers, crystal clinking against crystal. I stayed kneeling, fingers trembling, napkin soaked, trying to gather every piece before someone stepped on it. My face burned with humiliation, my ears ringing with their laughter, and then, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just the sting of glass slicing skin. It wasn't just the humiliation of being treated like a maid in my own house. It was the culmination of years of being silenced, dismissed, overlooked, erased. Years of watching Nathan win by default, simply because he wasn't me. That night, as I crouched on the marble floor, bloodied and humiliated beneath the weight of their stares, a vow began to take shape inside me. I would never kneel for them again. Not for spilled champagne. Not for their approval. Not for their love. I would rise. I would carve my own place. And one day, they would bow their heads to me, not in mockery, but in respect. But respect wasn't given in this family. It was taken. So I stood, tall despite the trembling in my hands, glass still cutting into my palm. My mother's eyes narrowed, her lips parting to scold me again, but this time, I didn't lower my gaze. I looked straight at Nathan. Straight at his smug grin, his champagne raised like a crown point. "One day," I thought, "you'll choke on that toast." The jazz band swelled, the guests laughed, the champagne flowed. The moment passed for them. But not for me. Never for me. That night, the blood on my hand wasn't just from broken glass. It was a promise written in red, and promises like that don't wash away. The morning after the party, the house was quiet, almost eerily so. You'd never guess 100 people had been packed inside these walls only hours ago, their laughter ricocheting off the chandeliers, their shoes scuffing the marble floors. The scent of spilled champagne lingered faintly, sweet but sour, like the aftertaste of humiliation. I stood in the kitchen, rinsing the blood from my hand. The cut had crusted overnight, a thin red line etched across my palm like an omen. I pressed against it until the sting flared, because pain, at least, was proof I was still here. My mother swept in, heels clicking against the tile. She was already dressed for brunch, her emerald dress replaced with a beige power suit, pearls tight against her throat. She didn't look at me, just went straight to the coffee machine. "You embarrassed us last night," she said flatly. I didn't reply, her manicured nails tapped against the counter. "Do you even realize what people must think of us? Of Nathan? Of this family?" Family. The word tasted like rust. "You were the one who told me to serve drinks," I said quietly. She turned then, her eyes narrowing like slits of glass. Don't twist this on me, Sophia. You've always been clumsy. Always drawing attention in the worst ways. Honestly, I don't know what to do with you. Her words landed like blows, the kind you don't bruise from on the outside, but ones that split you open on the inside. Nathan strolled in then, sunglasses perched on his head, his smile smug as ever. He wrapped an arm around our mother, pressing a kiss to her cheek. Morning, Mom. Rough night, he asked, though the gleam in his eyes was directed at me. Your sister, she said with a sigh, made quite the scene. Nathan chuckled, pouring himself coffee. What else is new? I felt the cut in my palm throb. They spoke around me, over me, never to me. It was as if I was air, needed, but invisible, but air can suffocate. Later that week, I overheard something I wasn't meant to. My parents were in the study, voices low but urgent. The shares will transfer to Nathan once the paperwork's finalized, my father said. Good, my mother replied. We can't risk Sophia having access to anything. She'd waste it. Or worse, she'd ruin Nathan's chances. A silence followed, heavy. She's still our daughter, my father murmured. My mother scoffed. She's an obligation. I stood frozen in the hallway, their words wrapping around my chest like a vice. Obligation. Not daughter. Not family. Just a burden to carry until they could cut me loose. That was when the plan began to take shape, not a full plan, not yet. But a seed. Something dangerous. Something alive. I started small. Listening. Watching. Nathan liked to brag about his deals, his women, his spending. He thought no one paid attention, least of all me. But I did. I remembered every slip of his tongue, every careless confession. After too many drinks, like the time he boasted to a friend about skimming money from one of the company's accounts. Just a few grand here and there, he laughed. Dad won't notice. It's nothing. Or the night he whispered to a girl in the driveway, promising her a trip to Vegas on the company card that I kept track. Dates. Names. Amounts. A quiet ledger only I could see. The more I watched, the more I realized, Nathan wasn't golden. He was tarnished. But everyone was too blinded by his shine to see the rot underneath, and my mother, she polished him daily, covering his cracks, making sure the world only saw brilliance, but brilliance can blind you. And sometimes, the brightest light hides the deepest shadows. I still bled from my hand every time I looked at the scar forming. It became my reminder. A mark of the vow I'd made on the marble floor. I wouldn't confront them yet. No. Revenge is like wine, it needs time to mature, to darken, to gather strength. So I smiled when they ignored me. I nodded when they dismissed me. I played the part of the ghost in my own home. All the while, I collected evidence, patterns, weaknesses, because one day, their empire of glass would shatter, and this time, they would be the ones kneeling in the shards. I used to think silence meant weakness. That the quiet ones were the ones who got trampled. But silence, I was learning, was a weapon. It let me move unseen. It let me hear things that weren't meant for my ears. Nathan never worried about me. Why would he? I was the shadow in every room, the family embarrassment. He thought I was too meek, too clumsy, too broken to ever matter. That was his mistake. I started noticing patterns. Nathan was reckless, but predictable. Tuesday nights he went to the downtown bar with his coworkers. Fridays, he disappeared with women who were never the same twice. He came home late, smelling of whiskey and perfume, bragging on the phone about deals he didn't close and money he didn't earn. I took notes. Dates, times, names. A growing journal hidden in the back of my closet. One night, I followed him. Not close enough to be seen, but close enough to know. He stumbled out of a bar with two men I recognized from the company. They were laughing too. Loudly, their words thick with alcohol. Pulled 50 grand from the project budget, Nathan slurred. Dad's so distracted he'll never see it missing. They all roared with laughter. $50,000. That wasn't pocket change. That was theft. I snapped a picture from across the street. The flash didn't go off. My hands trembled as I zoomed in, catching his smug face mid-brag. It was the first piece of real evidence. Not whispers. Not suspicions. Proof. I walked home that night with my heart pounding like war drums. The city lights blurred around me, every sound sharper than usual, every shadow deeper. I wasn't just Sophia Hayes, the forgotten daughter. I was something else now. Something dangerous, but danger has a way of finding you when you least expect it. 2 days later, my mother stormed into my room without knocking. She waved a credit card statement in my face. Why are there charges here in your name? I blinked. What charges? $2,400 at a boutique downtown. A hotel bill. Sophia, if you're stealing, I didn't, I cut in. My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. Her eyes narrowed, sharp as needles. Don't lie to me. I knew immediately. Nathan. It wasn't enough for him to have everything. He needed to take what little was left of me. That night at dinner, I tried to speak. Those charges aren't mine, I said carefully, my fork scraping against the china plate. Nathan smirked across the table, sipping his wine. Then who are they, Sophia? Ghosts? My father glanced up briefly, then back down at his meal. My mother shook her head in disgust. You'll never take responsibility for anything, she muttered. I wanted to scream, to pound my fists on the table until the china shattered like that champagne glass. But instead, I sat in silence. And inside, I carved another tally into the list of debts Nathan owed me, because the thing about silence is, it doesn't mean surrender. It means strategy. The more they ignored me, the more invisible I became. And the more invisible I became, the easier it was to see them clearly. I noticed how my father's hands trembled when he signed documents, how he hesitated before answering Nathan's questions about the company. He was losing his grip, and Nathan was tightening his. I saw how my mother's eyes followed Nathan like he was the sun, how she basked in his glow and never noticed the shadows he cast, and I realized something important: their blindness was my opportunity. One evening, when the house was quiet, I slipped into Nathan's room. His laptop sat open on his desk, the screen asleep but unlocked. My breath caught as I touched the trackpad. Emails. Dozens of them. Threads about transfers, budgets, adjustments. Numbers that didn't add up. And attached, PDFs of invoices that looked wrong. I copied everything onto a flash drive I'd hidden in my pocket. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped it. Every click felt like a gunshot in the silence of his room. But he never stirred. He was out again, no doubt burning money that wasn't his. When I slipped back into my room, I stared at the flash drive in my palm. It was small, ordinary, silver. But it felt heavy, like it carried the weight of everything I'd been denied for the first time. I had power. I didn't know how to use it yet. But I knew one thing for certain: Nathan wasn't untouchable. He was human. And humans bleed. As I lay in bed that night, the scar on my palm itched, a reminder of the vow I'd made. I traced the line with my fingertip, and for the first time in years, I smiled. Not the forced smile my family demanded, but a real one. One born from fire, because the cracks in their perfect empire had finally begun to show, and I was the one holding the hammer. The flash drive burned in my pocket like a live wire. For days, I carried it everywhere, terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. It wasn't just data, it was leverage. Proof. The first crack in Nathan's golden armor, but leverage means nothing if you don't know how to use it. And I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't a businesswoman. I wasn't a lawyer. I was the forgotten daughter who served champagne until her hands bled. But that scar in my palm reminded me, pain can be transformed. I just needed to find the right weapon. I started small. Research. Hours spent in the library, my laptop glowing in the dim light as I searched terms I barely understood. Fraud. Embezzlement. Insider trading. Each article felt like a doorway into a world Nathan thought I could never enter. He was careless. Too busy basking in the glow of our mother's approval to realize someone was watching. He used the same weak password variations for everything. Birthdays. Pet names. Even Nathan 123. Pathetic. Within a week, I had access to more than just his emails. Bank accounts. Transfers. Hidden credit cards. And tucked among them, an account under someone else's name. Offshore. Thousands of dollars moving in and out like an invisible tide. Nathan wasn't just reckless. He was criminal. The knowledge made my hands tremble. Not with fear, but with anticipation. Still, I waited. Because revenge rushed is revenge wasted. Instead, I played the part of the silent sister. Invisible. Forgettable. The one they thought was too weak to matter. At dinner, I let my mother scold me for being late. I let my father ignore me. I let Nathan grin across the table like he owned the air we breathed, and every time, I swallowed the humiliation like bitter medicine, knowing it was making me stronger. But then came the night that nearly broke me. It was another party. Not as big as Nathan's promotion, but still lavish: caterers, champagne fountains, designer gowns. The kind of party where the walls themselves dripped with money. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes because apparently my role in this family was dishwasher as well as maid. My mother swept in, her voice sharp. Sophia, we're running low on champagne. Bring out another tray. I froze. The memory of shattered glass flashed behind my eyes. The laughter. The humiliation. I'd rather not, I said quietly. Her eyes widened, as though I'd spat in her face. Excuse me? I said no. The silence between us was electric. Then came the sting, her hand across my cheek. The sound echoed in the tiled room. My skin burned, but it wasn't pain I felt. It was rage. Pure, molten rage that surged through my veins like fire. Don't you ever speak to me like that again, she hissed. You are nothing without us. Nothing. And she left me there, shaking, my hand pressed against my burning cheek. That was the moment I stopped waiting. They thought I was nothing? Fine. I would show them what nothing could do. The next day, I made my first move. I emailed myself copies of Nathan's falsified invoices. I uploaded screenshots of his offshore transfers to a cloud account he couldn't touch. I began assembling a dossier, piece by piece, like building a bomb no one could see but me, but evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed allies. People who would believe me when the time came. That's when I remembered him, the stranger from Nathan's party. The gray-haired man who had whispered, "They shouldn't treat you like this." I'd caught his name in passing. Richard Cole. I googled him. A retired financial auditor. Respected. Connected. Dangerous to the wrong people. I found his office address downtown. Walking into that building felt like stepping onto a stage I wasn't prepared for. My hands shook as I clutched the folder of evidence I'd printed. But the scar on my palm reminded me, I wasn't here to beg. I was here to change everything. His secretary barely looked at me until I said his name. Then, maybe out of pity or curiosity, she let me in. Richard sat behind a desk piled with papers, glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked up, surprised. "Sophia Hayes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We met at my brother's party." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "You were the one with the glass." "Yes." I swallowed hard. "And I need your help." I placed the folder on his desk. Pages spilled out, emails, transfers, invoices. Proof of Nathan's sins. He leaned forward, scanning, his brows knitting together. When he finally looked up, his eyes were sharper, colder. "You understand what this is?" he asked. I nodded. "It's my brother. And it's my family. And I need to bring them down." For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air. Then Richard sat back, steepling his fingers. "You're playing with fire, Sophia." "I know." His lips curved into the faintest of smiles. "Good. Because fire is the only way to burn rot out of an empire." My heart pounded. For the first time, someone believed me. For the first time, I wasn't alone. As I left his office, the city lights flickering against the dusk, I felt a shift inside me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I was a spark, and sparks can start wildfires. The city felt different the next morning, as though the skyline itself had shifted while I slept. Even the air carried a strange heaviness, a silence between the usual rhythms of car horns and vendor calls. I told myself it was exhaustion, that the paranoia I carried was bending the edges of my world. But deep down, I knew better. The shadows that had trailed me since this began were no longer keeping their distance, they were closing in. I tried to shake it off by sticking to routine. Coffee at the corner shop. A brisk walk through the park. A casual scan of my phone. For emails I didn't remember signing up for. Nothing looked unusual, yet everything did. A man at the cafe stirred his drink too slowly. A woman with headphones seemed to be following me across 3 blocks. Even the pigeons on the lamppost startled me when they scattered, as though they too sensed danger near. When I reached my office, the unease hadn't lifted. I unlocked the door, heart racing, only to find the room colder than it should have been. Papers lay exactly where I'd left them the night before, except for one. A folder on the center of my desk was slightly open, as if someone had rifled through it. I hadn't touched that file in weeks. I approached it cautiously, half expecting some grotesque surprise inside. Instead, tucked between the reports was a single note, handwritten in a looping script: "Stop digging, Sophia. You're in over your head." The warning hit harder than any scream could have. Whoever had written it knew my name, knew my habits, and had been inside my supposedly locked office. My stomach twisted. Fear was no longer an abstract idea, it was breathing down my neck. I shoved the note in my bag and forced myself to keep moving. If they wanted me to stop, it meant I was close to something. Too close. I couldn't afford to back away now. Later that afternoon, I met Daniel again. His eyes darted around the quiet diner where we sat, scanning every face the way I had learned to do. "You look pale," he said. "They broke into my office," I whispered, sliding the note across the table. He read it, jaw tightening. "This isn't a game anymore, Sophia," he muttered. "You're dealing with people who erase problems permanently. Do you understand?" I hated the way his voice quivered. If Daniel, the man who had once been unflappable, was scared, then I was right to be terrified. But fear didn't erase the fire in my chest. "Then tell me who they are," I said, almost pleading. "Stop protecting me with half-truths. I need the whole picture." He hesitated, hands clenched around his cup. Finally, he leaned closer. "They call themselves the Veil. A network, part political, part corporate, part something darker. No borders, no clear faces. They work in shadows because shadows are harder to fight. And the thing you found? That missing piece in the archives? It wasn't meant to exist outside their circle. The Veil. Even the name carried menace, as though it had been designed to smother light. Before I could press him further, the door of the diner creaked open. A man in a gray coat walked in. harmless, at first glance. But Daniel stiffened, his entire body locking into place. "We're done here," he whispered, sliding out of the booth. "Go out the back. Now." I followed his urgency without question. The narrow hallway behind the kitchen smelled of grease and steam, but I barely noticed. My pulse thundered in my ears as we slipped through the rear exit into the biting evening air. That's when I realized Daniel wasn't behind me anymore. I turned back just in time to see him through the kitchen window, pinned by two men who seemed to appear out of nowhere. One pressed something metallic against his ribs while the other searched his jacket. Daniel didn't fight. His eyes found mine instead, wide with warning, pleading for me to run, and I did. My feet carried me across alleys and side streets, lungs burning, mind screaming. I didn't stop until I reached the relative safety of my apartment, bolting the door behind me. Inside, the silence mocked me. Daniel was gone, or worse. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding to the floor as the weight of it all crashed down, but then I remembered his eyes. Not just fear, but intent. He wanted me to keep going, even if it cost him. He believed the truth mattered more than either of us. I rose slowly, wiping the sweat from my palms. If the veil thought a note would scare me, they underestimated just how far I was willing to go. Yet even as I told myself that, I couldn't shake the image of Daniel's face in that final moment. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, or if I'd already lost the only ally I had. I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the dark, and whispered to no one, "This isn't over." The night stretched long and merciless. Sleep never came, only fragments of it teased me before shattering into jolts of fear. Every creak of the floorboards, every passing siren outside my apartment window, felt like a signal that they were near. By dawn, exhaustion had painted my reflection in hollow eyes and trembling hands, but I didn't stop moving. Daniel's capture, or sacrifice, depending on how I chose to see it, left me with no time to collapse. I owed him more than fear. I owed him defiance. I started with the note. Under the weak light of my desk lamp, I studied the handwriting again. Elegant, looping, almost old-fashioned. Whoever wrote it didn't rush, didn't panic. This wasn't the scrawl of a grunt. It belonged to someone comfortable with control. A leader, perhaps. Next, I opened the hidden file on my laptop, the one Daniel had helped me piece together before. My fingers hovered over the trackpad as though the screen itself might burn me. The fragments of data revealed patterns, transactions. Moving through shell companies, contracts signed by names that dissolved into nothingness. Yet when you looked at the web as a whole, all the threads converged toward one word: Havenstone.it was a corporation, at least on paper. Real estate, infrastructure, shipping. Clean industries masking something foul beneath. And at the very center of it all sat the veil. My chest tightened as I traced their reach across continents. Ports, banks, even governments. They weren't just in the shadows, they were pulling strings that made the world dance. I shut the laptop before the knowledge consumed me. Too much truth could suffocate. Later that morning, I forced myself out into the city, keeping to crowded streets, blending with commuters. If I stayed in the apartment too long, paranoia would become my cage. Besides, I needed answers. Daniel no longer could give me. I found myself at the library, a cathedral of quiet that had once felt safe. Today, it was another battlefield. Every footstep echoed too loudly, every cough turned my head. But the archives offered what I needed: old reports on Havenstone. Decades of news clippings, press releases, and whispered scandals swept under the rug. One article caught my attention. A port worker in Marseille had vanished after accusing Havenstone of smuggling unregistered cargo. His body was never found. Another clipping spoke of a journalist in Jakarta who'd been investigating their land deals. She died in what was described as a robbery gone wrong. Different continents, same pattern. Whispers silenced before they became storms. As I tucked the copies into my bag, a shadow stretched across the page. My pulse spiked. Slowly, I lifted my gaze. A man stood 2 tables away, pretending to skim a book upside down. His eyes, though, were locked on me. I didn't wait for confirmation. I stuffed the papers into my coat and walked quickly toward the exit, heart hammering. Behind me, his footsteps followed, measured, deliberate. Outside, the air was sharp with winter's bite. I blended into the crowd, weaving through pedestrians, doubling back twice to test if he was still there. He was always 3 paces behind. Panic clawed at me, but I forced it down. If I ran, I'd stand out. If I froze, I'd be cornered. Instead, I slipped into the subway station, down the escalator, and boarded the first train that screeched to a stop. The doors closed just as he reached the platform. Our eyes met through the glass. His expression was unreadable, but his intent was clear. He wouldn't stop. The train jolted forward, carrying me away. For now. By the time I returned to my apartment, dusk had settled like a bruise over the city. I locked the door, triple-checked the windows, and spread the papers across my table. My hands shook, not from cold but from clarity. The veil wasn't just a whisper in Daniel's voice anymore. They were real, tangible, breathing down my neck, and then I saw it, tucked in the corner of a report I hadn't noticed before. A name. Not Havenstone. Not a shell company. A person, Eleanor Voss. The article described her as a philanthropist and board member of Havenstone, known for funding orphanages and cultural projects. But beneath the surface, subtle hints suggested more. She wasn't just another executive, she was a strategist, someone who shaped Havenstone's direction from the shadows. For the first time, the veil had a face.my phone buzzed then, startling me so badly I nearly dropped it. No number displayed. Just a blank screen with a single message: "You're playing with fire, Sophia. Stop before it consumes you." I stared at it, a chill crawling up my spine. They knew where I was. They knew what I was doing. And yet, despite the terror gnawing at me, another thought bloomed in my chest: if they were warning me again, it meant I still mattered. I wasn't expendable, at least not yet. I whispered Daniel's name into the empty room, as though speaking it would bring him back. Then I whispered another, one that tasted strange on my tongue but carried the weight of revelation: Eleanor Voss. The game had shifted. The veil wasn't faceless anymore. And I wasn't running, I was hunting. The name Eleanor Voss clung to my mind like smoke. All night, I whispered it in the dark, trying to imagine her face. A philanthropist? The article said. A saint with polished smiles, cutting ribbons at orphanages, shaking hands with presidents. But I knew better. Saints don't leave bodies buried in shadows. Saints don't write warnings in looping cursive. By morning, I had a plan, or at least the skeleton of one. If Eleanor was the strategist behind Havenstone, she was the key. And keys, no matter how guarded, could be turned out. I spent the day at a cafe across from Havenstone's New York headquarters, a glass and steel tower that clawed at the clouds. Its lobby bustled with executives, interns, and tourists snapping photos. I sat with my untouched coffee, pretending to scroll my phone while my eyes tracked the revolving doors. Hours passed before I saw her. Eleanor Voss was exactly as the pictures promised: elegant, unyielding, carved from marble. Silver hair swept into a perfect chignon, diamond earrings catching the winter sun, and a black coat tailored so sharply it looked like it could cut. She moved through the lobby like a tide, people parting instinctively around her. I snapped a photo on my phone, my hands trembling. Proof. Not just a name anymore, a living, breathing predator. When she exited the building, I followed. Not too close, not too obvious. My pulse thudded with each step as she slipped into a black car with tinted windows. A chauffeur shut the door, and the vehicle melted into traffic. I should have let it go. But I didn't. The next day, I was waiting again. And the day after that. Each time, I learned something small. The coffee she ordered from the cafe in the lobby, black, no sugar. The bodyguard who hovered 3 paces behind her, ex-military, judging by his stance. The driver who never spoke. Routine was her religion, and routine meant vulnerability. On the 4th day, I followed her. It felt reckless, insane even, but desperation had become my compass. Through the crush of Manhattan traffic, I kept 2 cars behind. My eyes never left the black vehicle as it wound through the city, finally stopping in front of a brownstone mansion on the Upper East Side. Eleanor stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement, and vanished inside. I parked blocks away, my chest heaving. My camera app was full now: her face, her house, her car. Enough to convince myself she wasn't untouchable. Enough to remind myself that the veil wasn't an idea, it was flesh and blood. But with proof came danger. That night, I returned home to find my door ajar. I froze in the hallway, listening. The apartment was silent, too silent. I stepped inside, every nerve screaming. The papers on my desk had been disturbed, the pages shuffled, the edges bent. My laptop sat open, its screen glowing faintly, and on the keyboard lay a single white feather. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed. A feather. Innocuous. Harmless. Yet it felt like a noose tightening around my throat. They had been here. In my sanctuary. Breathing my air. Touching my life. The message was clear: we see you. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against the wall, a kitchen knife clutched in my fist, the feather on the table before me. By dawn, resolve had replaced fear. If the veil wanted to remind me of their power, they had miscalculated. Because all they did was harden me. I booked a ticket to Boston, where Eleanor was scheduled to speak at a charity gala. The event was public, her appearance announced in glossy magazines and society columns. There, I could get closer. There, I could look into her eyes and know if she was the one pulling the strings that strangled my life. The night of the gala, I wore a borrowed black dress, my hair pinned back to hide my face. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and sequins. The air thick with perfume and pretense. Waiters floated with trays of champagne, their smiles rehearsed, and then she appeared, Eleanor Voss, in a gown of midnight blue, diamonds cascading down her throat. Applause rippled through the crowd as she took the stage, her voice smooth as velvet, thanking donors for their generosity, speaking of children saved and futures built. I watched from the shadows, bile rising in my throat, when the speech ended. I slipped closer, weaving through the crowd until I stood near the stage's edge. She descended gracefully, shaking hands, exchanging practiced smiles. And then, for a moment, our eyes met. It was brief, but it was enough. Her gaze lingered, sharp and knowing, as if she recognized me though we had never spoken. A smile curved her lips, small and cold, before she turned away to greet another admirer. The room spun. My breath caught. She knew. I left the gala before the night ended, the sound of applause chasing me into the cold. Back in my hotel room, I replayed that glance again and again. It hadn't been curiosity. It had been recognition. Eleanor Voss wasn't just a strategist. She was the hunter, and now she had seen her prey. The days after Boston felt like walking across a minefield barefoot. Every shadow whispered, every reflection held danger. Eleanor's eyes haunted me, the recognition, the small victorious curve of her lips. I had wanted proof. Now I had it. And it terrified me, but terror can be sharpened into a blade. Back in New York, I stopped hiding. No more waiting for them to strike first. Daniel's sacrifice demanded action. The scar on my palm demanded it. The girl who once poured champagne at her mother's command was gone. What remained was something harder, something forged in humiliation and fire. I spent weeks constructing my weapon, not of steel, but of truth. Using every file Daniel had left me, every transaction I'd traced, I built a case that couldn't be ignored. Shell companies, offshore accounts, kickbacks disguised as philanthropy. And threaded through it all, Eleanor Voss's signature, but truth alone wasn't enough. Truth had to bleed. So I planned the stage, my mother's next charity gala. It was always her pride, her theater of perfection. The place where Nathan flaunted his charm and my parents played royalty. This time, though, their kingdom would crumble under its own lights. On the night of the gala, I dressed in black again, but not to disappear. Tonight, black was armor. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and hollow laughter. My mother, radiant in gold, floated from guest to guest. Nathan boasted near the bar, his laughter cutting sharp. Eleanor arrived late, as though she knew the world would wait for her. The crowd hushed as she entered, her diamonds glinting like knives. I waited until the speeches began. My mother at the podium, thanking donors, her voice syrupy sweet. Cameras flashed. Applause swelled. And then, silence, as the giant projector screen flickered alive behind her. At first, confusion. The slideshow of smiling children was replaced with documents. Bank records. Wire transfers. Names of the dead journalists, the missing port workers. Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother's voice faltered. Nathan froze, his drink halfway to his lips. Eleanor turned her head, slow and deliberate, her eyes narrowing as the evidence bled across the screen. I stepped forward then, into the light. These, I said, my voice steady, are the truths you've been drinking over. The cost of your champagne is measured in blood. All eyes shifted to me. My mother's face drained of color. Nathan's jaw clenched. And Eleanor, she smiled. That same cold smile. Do you think this will stop us? She murmured, her voice carrying even without a microphone. We are not one woman. We are the tide. I met her gaze, my scar burning. Then drown. Security swarmed. Cameras flashed wildly. The crowd fractured into panic and chaos. And in that chaos, truth spread, beamed live to every news station I'd arranged, every journalist I'd tipped. The veil wasn't invisible anymore. Their sins were out, raw and undeniable. The aftermath unfolded like a storm. Nathan was arrested within days, his accounts frozen, his charm useless against handcuffs. My parents' empire crumbled, shares seized, properties raided. They tried to claim ignorance, but their signatures screamed louder than their excuses. And Eleanor? She didn't run. She didn't plead. She vanished. One day, she stood before flashing cameras, defiant in her diamonds. The next, she was gone, like smoke and wind. No one could find her, not the FBI, not Interpol. She lived up to her name. The veil, but even shadows can't hide from ruin. Her charity foundations dissolved. Her name turned venom in society circles. Her fortune scattered like ash. She may have escaped prison, but she couldn't escape exposure. And me? I didn't celebrate. Victory wasn't champagne and applause. Victory was silence, the kind that comes after screams, when you finally breathe again. Weeks later, I stood in the ruins of my childhood home. The chandeliers were gone, the marble floors cracked, the empire auctioned off to strangers. The air smelled of dust, not perfumed. I ran my fingers over the scar in my palm. It no longer throbbed. It pulsed with something new, Closure. Daniel's sacrifice had meaning. My humiliation had meaning. Even the feather on my desk had meaning. It had been the last warning before the fall. I whispered into the hollow rooms, my voice steady. You turned me into a ghost in my own family. But ghosts don't die. They haunt. Outside, the city. Moved on, unaware of the girl who had torn an empire apart. And that was fine. I didn't need the world to know my name. I only needed them to remember it, Sophia Hayes, not their servant. Not their burden. Not their shadow, but their ending.